Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to start the call to order the meeting of November 10th, 2009, City Council and Redevelopment Agency. If you'd like to rise, please, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, thank you. Item 2, changes to the order of agenda. There's been a request from a citizen to, excuse me. Go ahead, what you need to do.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
That's all right. There's been a request from a citizen to change the order of agenda, item 8C, to move it up a bit to after 6. I don't know what the council feels, whether we want to move that item up or move it up on new business or move it above 7 or not. We have a number of items to discuss tonight. So,
Council's pleasure?
pardon me?
At the mayor's pleasure?
What the gentleman want to do?
Open.
No? Yes? Pardon me? I mean, I'm inclined to keep it where it is because we have a number of items that are important to discuss this evening. I don't believe it's going to take that long for item 7. What I will do is move it up from 8C to 8A, or move it up, but we'll still have item 7 first. So let's make that note if we could.
Okay. 8C.
8C. We'll move it up to 8A, or move it above 8A. Okay? All right. All right. Paper. Next item on the agenda is item 3, report from closed session. Mr. Rubens?
Mr. Mayor, there's no reportable actions, and we did not complete closed session items 3 and 4, 2 and 3,
Okay.
which will continue.
We may try to do that after the meeting. Okay, thank you very much. Item number 4, council communications and announcements. Mr. Lewis?
None, sir.
Mr. Ahmad?
None, sir.
Mr. Grocott?
Yes.
Mr. Royce? I know you have something.
Well, I'll take some time then. I have 2, actually. The first item is a week ago Friday, October 30th, was close to Halloween. It was close enough to have our first annual Goblin Walk on Laurel Street. Rarely do you have an event the first time and be so successful. There were a couple thousand kids and parents downtown, a lot of the businesses that participated. And as you walked around, the police helped out a lot, but we really would like to recognize both the Chamber and the Park and Rec Department and all of your people that helped make it a success. And everybody I talked to said we can't wait until we do the second one. So with that, Council has a little token of our appreciation that the Mayor would like to pass out right now.
Why don't you go down and do that? You please. All right.
You're the mayor.
Okay. I'll do it. Let me give credit where credit's due here. This one. Basically, Randy Royce put together a montage, collage of whatever.
Well, on behalf of Doug, I think you would say the same thing. It was our staffs that did a fabulous job. And so particularly Wendy Scatino from my staff and Jean Archbold from yours. But it was a team effort, and it was a great cooperative effort. And I don't think the stores ever had any clue what was coming. And they'll be ready next year. But it was amazing. Thank you. Thanks.
I echo that, and I'll stray away from my philosophy to take all the credit, none of the blame, and express that the staff, this was really staff-driven. This was an idea that I came up with, but you know how ideas are. They're fairly simple to formulate, but we had an excellent collaborative with the Chamber and with our staff. Jerry Fujimoto, in conjunction with the Youth Commission, came down and helped out. Marty Miller donated the bags for the event, and Kathy and Giroux and Jean Archbold were very instrumental in making this event a very successful event. So we thank them very much.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Again, as we said earlier, obviously this was a very, very successful event, and I'd like to thank Councilmember Royce for putting together those pictures in the CD-ROM. I know he spent a great deal of time on that, and it's a great first one, and we're looking forward to hopefully the second one. Mr. Royce, you have one other item?
Yes, one other item. This deals with, about a month ago, of course, we had some business activity in which we're in process of selling a piece of property on Industrial and Holly. The vendor that looks like it's going to be going in there is In-N-Out Burger. And what I would like to propose at a future council meeting, maybe the next one, if I could get some support on this, there aren't many times when we do sell land or sell real estate. And what I would like to do is have a kind of a general discussion. I got 4 items here. One is basically to kind of look at some guidelines on what would be allowable or maybe even unallowable uses of those funds. It'll be about $1.5 million that we're getting from that sale. Secondly is to develop some criteria on purchasing of new property from those proceeds if we decide to do so. Third would be, do we want to consider instructing staff to proceed on replacing that property with like kind of a like-kind exchange? Is this the market where, since we do have sales from proceeds, do we want to convert the cash that we get from that to other like-kind property? And the last item is also just understanding I would personally just like to understand the kind of the accounting flow and transaction. And in city finance, I'm not an expert on this. I know that money, I think, will just appear in our cash account, where with industry, you basically have a gain on sale of property. You know, you relieve the asset, you record the gain on sale, you have the debit go to cash. I mean, there's all these transactions. And I just really want to make sure that, this money that just goes to cash, is that cash? Is it part of our reserves? I just want to make sure that we have some accountability and tracking when we do sell a piece of real estate. And, 2 years that I've been on council, this, to me, is the first piece of property that we have actually sold. So with that, I'd like to make a proposal, but of course it would, require, if we do want to spend some time talking about this, consensus from all of us to be able to do that.
I don't think I have a problem personally with discussing this at all. I believe we just have to agendize the item, Mr. Weiss, and I think I'm not sure we're going to we'll have to look at the November agenda, and we only have one meeting in December, and I know we're going to be talking about finances, city finances, and that might be an option, but if not, certainly in January we would have an opportunity with the new council to talk about it. Do you have any thoughts on that, Mr. Weiss?
I mean, a couple of thoughts. One is that we do have time. We still have a lot of work to do before we actually close.
Right, we're not
going
to get that.
So I don't know if the council wants to discuss it sooner than later. That's okay. Our next meeting, I don't have our tentative agenda in front of me. I know there are a lot of public works items on that particular agenda. The December meeting is the finance meeting. It's the reorganization. That is the night we're talking finances, and getting signals that that's not the night we want to do it. So, but. We can certainly look for an agenda to put it on. It is a finance issue. It is something that, whether it's maybe with mid-year budget discussions, we could do it then, or we could, if we were to bring it forward at the next meeting, staff wouldn't have much chance to.
No, I don't think there's any. I just wanted to get your thoughts on that personally. Yeah. I think the earliest we could bring it forward is January, and that'd be the earliest. And it may be the second meeting in January, depending on what items carry over from, because we're not having a second meeting in December. So I don't have a problem. I think it's something we need to discuss, but as Mr. Weiss said, the agreement isn't going to close, if it ever does close, for at least 7 to 8 months.
There's nothing urgent about
right.
this.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to make sure you understood that. Okay. So we'll put that on the to-do. Yes, Mr. Grocott?
I would just throw in, following up on what you just said about when the deal would close, I do think it's a discussion we need to have. I wouldn't want to have that discussion until the deal has closed, and we know we have something to really talk about.
Philosophically, I think there's some points there that we might want to kick around. I agree with you, because it's imaginary money right at this instant. But I think in theory, I hesitate sometimes to put things in lockstep of what we'll do if we have this money. But again, I think we can have a little bit of a discussion when it won't be my leadership at that time, and it'll be Mr. Royce's, but in January or whatever, just at least to kick it around for 20 or 30 minutes and see what we have. And maybe we want to, like you said, postpone it until we actually do get it. Okay?
That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I have nothing tonight for communications and announcements. Item 5 is public comment. Is this person's wishing to address the City Council on matters not on the posted agenda? And I have some speaker slips. The first name I have is Mary Jo Hoffman. I'd like to keep your comments to approximately 2 minutes, please.
Hello, I'm Mary Jo Hoffman, resident of San Carlos. Members of Council, I wish to address you on a grave concern I have on the failure of Measure U. Why is it that San Mateo, a city that has 3 times our population but 4 times the amount of employees, were able to not only pass a hotel occupancy tax, but a sales tax that now makes theirs, to quote the opposition, the highest taxes in the Bay Area? Will the highest taxes in the Bay Area stop Bay Area residents from shopping at Hillsdale Mall, or the number of specialty stores and neighborhood malls that San Mateo offers? Perhaps for a couple of weeks. And then the holidays will come, and the notion of extra taxes will disappear, and all that revenue will be San Mateo's. San Mateo residents got it. They like what they have, and they voted and put where their mouth is. So San Mateo will reap the benefits, and once again, San Carlos will be left holding the bag. Why did San Mateo's sales tax measure pass so decidedly? And why did Measure U fail? My belief, the biggest reason, is that unlike San Mateo, with the unanimous council support, our council was fractured by a dissenting vote. By having the dissenting vote, from the voters' perspective, it invalidated every effort that this council and staff has made to this point to cut costs and balance the budget. Has San Mateo Council and staff done more than San Carlos? No. In adjusting for population variances, from my analysis, San Carlos has done a far superior job for a longer period. To all of you, I say the voters of San Carlos have spoken, and you must arrive at the same interpretation of what that means. You cannot cherry pick your favorites. You can't vote 3 times to approve a salary for a city manager position, which Councilmember Grocott has done, and then turn around and say he is paid too much and must be terminated. You can't tell the city to cut costs and find ways to live within our means, but not be open to changing arrangements with Belmont for a fire department that can cost our city up to $500,000 more than what Belmont pays. In other words, stop saying one thing and your actions clearly saying another. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker I have is Pat Bell.
Pat Bell, San Carlos resident. I want to say shame on this affluent town for voting no on you and refusing to support the vital services that the city provides and the minimal staff we have left. It's just appalling. And San Mateo is not the only community that passed a sales tax. Everyone else who had one on the ballot passed it. Now that the city has, the citizens have said they won't vote for a tax, we're really in the soup here. We have no money. We have Highlands Field, which is going to cost millions of dollars. Any town that can't afford vital services can't afford $1 million plastic grass field. Mark Weiss told me some time ago that if we had to, we could use that money for something else, and I think we have to. Now's the time. In my experience, the people who won't vote for Measure U are the same people who feel that their children are entitled to play on a nice dry field 365 days a year, 16 hours a day. And if they won't pay for it, then they can't have it. You know, I'm sorry for these kids who are going to grow up playing on muddy fields. Some of us grew up when there weren't any fields at all. We played in the mud. God forbid.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker I have is Kevin Clay.
honorable council members. I felt it was important for me to be here to communicate with all of you openly and explain why my vote on Measure U was a resounding no. I beg of all of you and all of the citizens to not be disrespectful or disingenuous to the election results. The majority did speak, and we need to listen and accept it as it is. Let me state unequivocally, it is not personal. These are my feelings. This is why I'm a no on you. I am a no new taxes believer. I've said this to most of you privately and publicly over the past few years. I already work 3 to 4 months out of the year to pay taxes. Enough is enough. My wife didn't take it personally when Bank of New York Mellon laid her off, so I don't think anyone should take it personally here with this issue. The goal and objective should be to design a fiscally sustainable government entity, and if you can't, then you are just prolonging the illusion of entitlement and borrowing from our future. Remember, this earth has been here for millions of years. This culture that we so richly believe we are entitled to is not even a blip in the history books. Keep your perspective long term. If you believe that just because we legislate a new law that will cure the ills of a section or an entire society, you are wrong. We really are all on borrowed Mother Nature's time. Nowhere in history has there ever been a society that has taxed its people into a sustainable state of prosperity and liberty. It is not fiscally sustainable, and that's what we need to do. I beg that you should start taking up the task of forging a government that is sustainable and affordable, because that will endure. And these are simple laws of nature and history. So, on to some suggestions. I do offer some positive suggestions, some ideas to help, because it's time to put the measure behind us, and let's move forward with some ideas. First off, I don't think we should compare our services or salaries or figures of any type with our neighboring cities. I don't believe that's leadership. I think that's following.
Mr. Clay, I'm going to ask you to sort of wrap it up. I'm trying to keep it to 2 minutes for everyone.
Okay, I'll be real quick. There's only a little bit left. Mendocino has a volunteer fire department, and those citizens are revered. How about a volunteer citizen group that cares for the parks? Engage the citizenry. I'm not convinced that the Chamber of Commerce should be in the city budget. I think they should be beholden to their own members. There's other ways to cut.
Mr. Clay, I really would ask you to finish, please.
I love this country. I love the Constitution. I cherish my freedom and liberty from the clutches of too powerful of a government that can restrict liberty. So let's get to work and fix the problem.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Clay. Okay, moving on. Item 6, consent calendar. Consent calendar items are considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items, excuse me, unless members of the council, staff, or public request specific items to be removed for separate action. Gentlemen?
Mr. Mayor, move approval of consent calendar items 6A through G.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve consent calendar items A through G. Is there any discussion on this motion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Roy?
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. Okay, thank you. Moving on. Item 7, reports to council. Reports to council are updates on key city projects by city department heads and staff and city subcommittees. They are informational in nature, and no action will be taken on these items at this meeting. And item 7A is a report to the council on wastewater treatment plant capital program. Mr. Weil, our public
Thank you, Mayor and Council. We, some time ago, you had approved a rate increase on wastewater rates, and sorry, I don't have a joke or a story on this one. It's a big dollar amount, $57 million, so probably something to be serious about. Dan Child, the general manager of the South Bayside System Administration, put together this presentation. Unfortunately, can't be here tonight due to a death of a friend. And so we have Teresa Herrera, who's going to give about a 15-minute presentation on the wastewater plant expansion program. Actually, it's a wastewater treatment plant improvement program and repair program more than expansion. With that, Teresa Herrera.
Thank you, Mr. Weil. Welcome, Mr. Herrera.
Thank you very much, Mayor and City Council. Thank you for inviting us here, me here. Sorry Dan couldn't make it. I will make this presentation as short as possible. There's a lot of slides, but I won't belabor any of the points. I'm not quite sure how to advance the slides, though. The mouse is the clicker. Wanted to just give a broader view of where the United States is in general. The American Society of Civil Engineers does a report card every year on the infrastructure of but all the states as well as the nation. And you can see the numbers that are up there. It is an aging infrastructure in the United States and in California, so that's what we're responding to. Whoops. That one. Overview of the SPSA treatment plant. It is at the end of Redwood Shores, Radio Road in Redwood Shores, right on the bay. The organization was formed as a JPA in 1975, and the member agencies are Belmont, Redwood City, San Carlos, and the West Bay Sanitary District. And the ownership percentages were based on the flow capacity that each of the member agencies purchased, and these are the percent ownership of the treatment plant, the outfall, the pump stations, and the influent force main. Right now, we estimate SBSA's infrastructure facilities to be about a $1 million asset. The majority of the treatment facilities were funded by grant funds in the late 70s. It came online in 1980. All but $8 million of the $65 million was grant funded, so we got a very good deal back then. And again, today, based on current engineering estimates, we're at about a $1 million facility. So we need to obviously keep our asset maintained and improved and reliable. Unfortunately, some of the previous management did have a lot of pressure to keep rates low since 1980, and therefore a lot of repair and maintenance were deferred. We're seeing a result of that deferred maintenance now with, and I'll show you some pictures of some of our facilities. The other result of that was that we have no cash reserves for doing the ongoing maintenance. And therefore, when we created a 10-year capital program, improvement program, to try to get our facilities back up to snuff, reliable state, as well as to allow us to start putting away some reserves from year to year so that we can keep the ongoing maintenance possible after 10 years. This is just reiterating some of what I was. Ultimately, it comes down to our task as a wastewater treatment facility is to protect the environment, to serve the member agencies, to allow people to flush their toilets and put water down the drain without thinking about it, and basically avoid polluting our waters of the state. You've probably heard a lot of press in the North Bay about sewage overflows, sewage spills into the bay. Don't want negative press. Don't want mandatory penalties, which is the $10,000 a gallon per day penalty if we violate our permit. Key elements of our capital improvement program are basically it touches every aspect of our system. Pump stations, we have an 8-mile-long force main. We have peak wet weather flow pumping issues. Our facilities within the plant and the pump stations are corroding, and then on down the list. I'm showing some pictures of particularly a lot of the corrosion that's happening in the plant. In a treatment plant, you have a lot of hydrogen sulfide, which when combined with oxygen, it will create a sulfuric acid and basically start eating away your concrete structures in the plant unless they're protected by some kind of epoxy coating is what we use to protect them. In many instances, the coating is deteriorated, and so our concrete structures we expect to last 100 plus years, and now you can see 30 years later we're already starting to eat into the concrete and showing some rebar on some of our structures. So it's pretty significant, pretty serious consequences of deferring our maintenance. Our fixed film reactors are one of our major secondary processes. These these media in here should not be in this state at all. It should be even, not jagged and falling down like that. A lot of our projects have to do with our electrical and instrumentation system. You can see the deteriorated state of some of our electrical panels. And this is a panel on the left, which is old technology, old wiring for a panel, and on the right is what new instrumentation panels do look like. So kind of a spaghetti mess on the left and something manageable on the right. Another key project is our force main. It's outside our treatment plant boundaries, but it runs from Menlo Park, which has a pump station, all the way to the treatment plant. It's 8 miles long, 40-plus years old. It used to be a gravity sewer pipe for some of the treatment plants that used to be, SBSA joined together several disparate treatment plants that used to operate independently. The force main is a concrete pipe, bell and spigot pipe. It was designed as a gravity pipe. It's running as a pressure pipe now. It was never meant to be a pressure pipe. So you can see there that it was designed for 12 psi, and we're currently exceeding 23 psi during wet weather flows. So, and we do have lots of failures. The failures, mostly we've been able to contain the sewage overflows on site, so it's not entered the waters of the state, but a couple of times we have. And as I said, the overflowing into waters of the state has some pretty serious monetary consequences. Our estimated replacement cost, as you can see, is $125 million for replacing the entire force main. This is apologize for the quality of this picture, but you can see it starts on the lower right at Menlo Park pump station and runs mostly along the frontage road or along the east side of 101, and then cuts down along Redwood Shores to the treatment plant. Another of our key projects are dealing with wet weather flows. Currently, the treatment plant has capacity for treating up to 80 million gallons per day of peak wet weather flow, and we're estimating what we're calling the ultimate peak wet weather flow, which is the year 2030, to be 92.7 million gallons per day. For us to increase the treatment capacity by that 12.7 MGD will take many, many, many tens of millions of dollars to do, if we can do it at all, because our site is pretty constrained. So we're looking at other methods to handle that additional 12.7 MGD, probably by some form of storage upstream before it gets to the treatment plant. Again, the consequence of not being able to handle wet weather flows by one method or another is that it would cause backups to the cities, the member agencies' sewer systems. Pump stations are another very high priority for us. We have 5 pump stations. They also are 40-plus years old. And basically, it's the same story as the treatment plant and the force main. We have a lot of issues. This last storm that we had a couple weeks ago, we had a failure at the San Carlos booster station. We were able to contain the flows, but it was a lot of running around and trying to handle the situation so that we didn't spill. And again, the treatment plant, severe corrosion throughout the facility. Our electrical system's outdated and we can't find parts anymore. Process equipment is at the end of its useful life. Usually you look at 25-ish years for useful life on equipment, and we're at 30 years on a lot of our equipment. And again, we want to provide another 30 years at least of high-level treatment. Our current capacity is 29 million gallons per day of dry weather flow and 80 million gallons a day of wet weather flow. And I did want to note that recycled water, we are producing recycled water and are distributing that throughout Redwood City, and we anticipate that amount of recycled water available to expand. the cost allocation. Our CIP, it's a 10-year capital improvement program estimated in 2006 dollars at $342 million. With inflation, we're looking at about $404 million. And as Robert mentioned, the city of San Carlos' share is $57.1 million. Sources we're looking at for funding include the federal stimulus money, and in California, the method for that money being distributed is via the State Revolving Fund Loan Program, overseen by the State Water Resources Control Board for wastewater plants, wastewater projects. We're looking at revenue bonds as well as bank loans. We do currently have 2 applications in for the stimulus funds, and we plan to have 2 more applications in soon for that money. This is the breakdown of the cost allocation amongst our member agencies. You can see there City of San Carlos at 57.1. And that is
Thank you, Ms. Herrera.
You're welcome.
Questions from the council? Mr. Royce?
Yeah, if I relate the wet garbage to dry garbage, I know there's a lot of work that we do on dry garbage, on education and recycling, and every time we get a bill, there's classes and brochures and so forth. What do you do? Have you done much with Cal Water? Because that's, of course, a source of the water on conservation. And secondly, have you done much with businesses and citizens on education? I know there was a card that was sent out about 6 months ago. It was the only thing I've seen in the 2 years I've been on council. Do you have, what plans do you have, again, with Cal Water? That's where the source of the water comes from, and from an educational point of view for our businesses and citizens.
I'll jump in there. Of course, the citizens don't get a sewer bill; they pay it with their property taxes. So we don't have the opportunity to educate through that medium. Cal Water does have a water conservation program, and pretty much it's been through the city that works with Cal Water and the water conservation. We've talked to them about actually building some links into our website, kind of hooking them in with our green programs as well. And Assistant City Manager Moore may be able to speak more to that. Well, there was another part to your question, and I'm trying to blank on it.
Education for citizens, businesses?
Mm-hmm. You do have maybe you could talk about Maya Slocum's program and how that's going?
Yeah, we do have a program in place. It's our source control program, a pre-treatment program that we go out. We do quite a bit of extensive amount of public outreach, primarily via schools. We go out to pretty much all the schools in our service area and talk to the kids there. We prepare presentation material, teaching materials to the teachers. Mm-hmm. We give talks at not so much city councils. That's something we could add to our program. It's mainly targeted towards businesses that put water or grease or restaurants or some kind of industrial waste down the sewer. We have quite an extensive outreach to businesses as well as schools.
Yeah, one of the programs is the dental amalgam program. The SBSA is required to reduce the amount of mercury coming out of the treatment plant, and one of the primary sources of mercury is actually old fillings from our mouths, and so they've been working with the dentistry community to try to contain those fillings and keep them from going down the drain.
Okay. And last question would be, I actually went for a tour down there a few years ago, part of our sister city. We had some people from a different part of the world that were interested in sewage. Very interesting. Where is the reclaimed water? I know Redwood City at that point was building a facility, and I think, what is the status of that? And then secondly, does San Carlos have any future opportunity to participate in a reclaimed water program, which would be piping reclaimed water back and using in our parks and so forth?
talk about the facility, and then I'll talk about the
Okay.
future.
Yeah, the facility is there a way to go backwards on that?
Yeah, probably so.
Or
I'll try
it's
to
the
do that.
second or third slide. Our recycled water facility is on the treatment plant site. We filter and disinfect the water, and then we have a storage tank on site also that then pumps out to the distribution system.
Oh.
And yes, we do have opportunity to expand
There it
it.
Yeah.
So there is opportunities, Robert, for St.
Yeah.
Carlos in the future?
Yeah,
for that?
the pipeline, Redwood City's pipeline, runs through St. Carlos. It runs down to Skyway, and then along the Bay Trail there. So there is the capacity to produce additional recycled water at the wastewater treatment plant. There's ability to store some additional recycled water at the wastewater plant. The missing link is a utility that would want to build a distribution system and distribute it. It's a money-losing proposition because you have to sell it for less than potable water, but it costs more to build a distribution system and obtain it than potable water.
But at some point, water will be expensive.
Yeah. However, I was very surprised to learn that Cal Water, in some of their service areas, is going into recycled water as a way of diversifying their water portfolio. So that's a possibility. I talked to their local general manager about that possibility.
Yeah, keep an eye out on that.
Yeah,
That's
I will.
good. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Ahmad.
Ms. Herrera, two very quick questions. Number one, I understand that just in an effort to be green, SBSA does do cogeneration of electricity. Just wanted to ask that. And number two, you have a biosolids composting program. Can you explain that very briefly?
We do use our one of the byproducts of our treatment system, which is methane digester gas, which is primarily methane. It has a high BTU content, and we do burn it in our cogeneration engine to produce electricity. It fuels, it powers the majority of our treatment plant electricity from that methane. Our solid waste, I guess I'll call it that, facility, it's a grease receiving station. So the local and extended beyond our local boundaries, grease haulers, mainly from restaurants, will bring their grease to our treatment plant and dump it into our receiving station. We want as much grease as possible because it boosts the methane gas that we'll produce out of our digesters, and therefore we can increase our generation of electricity via that. And we are looking at other, what we're calling food to waste energy projects within the treatment plant.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Grogott.
Just three quick ones. I noticed in the map that you showed of the pipeline, the fix for that is planned to be in the same location? Because if you look at that, it's a long, circuitous route, and you think to yourself, well, there would be a way to shorten it, but I suppose it's in some kind of right-of-way, and that's why it is where it is. Is that correct?
It's extremely difficult to find a route, a pathway for our force main. It's a large pipe. It starts at 33 inches in the orange area and goes up to 60 inches. So it's a 5-foot, it's as tall as me. We would almost guaranteed not be able to permit doing a straight line from Menlo Park to our treatment plant, nor can we, because all of the individual member agencies' sewage collection systems have to tie into it.
But also, if you just, if you imagine it following the slough or something like that,
yeah,
a little more
one of the
closely.
options, we are currently master planning the routing of the force main, and one of the options is to go along the levee that you see there.
Yeah, and stay closer to that, yeah. The other question I had was the idea of technology. If we're going to upgrade the facility, I would imagine a facility that was built 30, 40 years ago was built with a lot of old tech, what we would consider today old technology. You've mentioned a few things where I can see that some new technologies have been brought in for, using the resources of the waste material itself. But are there other things that we're missing out on because we have a 40-year-old plant that we're trying to upgrade in terms of new technology? You mentioned in here that if we built a totally new facility, it would be dollars that we couldn't afford. So we're not we're not going to go that route. But in quote unquote remodeling this facility, are we holding ourselves back from technologies?
You know, I think the biggest bang for our buck in terms of the new technology is our automation instrumentation program, electrical program. One of the goals of Dan Child, our manager, is to reduce. Right now, we're staffed 24/7. One of his goals is to automate the plant to the point where we can have a single 10-hour shift, which would save immensely on labor costs. The processes themselves, I mean, over the years, they really haven't changed much. So I think I know the processes are very solid, and it's not a lot of innovation in terms of processes themselves. So really, our low-hanging fruit is the automation program.
And then the last question is, you mentioned why we're in this situation because, sewer rates and so forth. Once we get out of this situation, is there some strategic planning that's going on to create some kind of sinking fund, perhaps, or so we start to either build reserves or at least have monies that are, as they come in, we target them to replace equipment and so forth?
Yes, definitely. In our financing plan, that is built in to be able to squirrel away some reserves from year to year.
So that's being looked at right now.
So that is built into the rates that you adopted.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Herrera. Mr. Weil,
I think
thank you.
You might have one more.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mr. Lewis, I apologize.
Well, no, that's fine. I was
See you
just
over there.
I was just going back to the beginning of the report, and so it's just a more of a discussion point for council, perhaps. I know that we had originally talked about a higher sewer fee increase, and we reduced that to 7%. Is there any reason that we should be, as we on the 14th will consider some budget adjustments? Is there any reason that the council should be reconsidering the 7% and raising those fees?
Mr. Weiss?
Well, I'm not so sure that the 14th would be the meeting for doing that, but we will be considering fee increases in several different areas, including a wastewater treatment. Not only do we have this project to pay for, but we also have a collection system that needs to be maintained. We're in the process of reevaluating our best practices, methodologies for maintaining that system. We're going to be recommending some improvements to that. So we will be bringing that entire issue back before the council in short order. I don't know that it'll be December 14th. I don't think we're going to be quite ready yet. But early next year we will be considering that, yes.
Yeah, I'm just thinking with the lack of funding flexibility that we may have considered that 7% at a time where we have been projecting a different future. So I just wanted to bring that up. I think it's something we have to consider.
We will clarification. The garbage franchise fees is totally separate from this.
Yes.
So yeah, there's no net transfer from the general fund to the general fund from the sewer fund. It's sewer fund pays its own way and is totally separate from the general
I understand.
fund.
Okay. There's one person wishing to speak. Pat Bell.
Pat Nelson, Carlos. I'm glad Mr. Royce brought up the question of liquid waste, and I know that he had talked some months ago about teaching people not to use their garbage disposals, for instance. There are a lot of ways that we as a city and we as individuals could help with this problem. I know that Robert is well aware of various kinds of paving surfaces that allow the water to seep into the ground instead of running into the sewers and overstressing the wastewater treatment plant. So we need to start thinking about storing your rainwater, putting it on your veggie garden later in the year, and letting it soak into your ground. Even if you don't store it in a rain barrel, don't let it run down your driveway into the gutter and out to the bay. There are a lot of environmental reasons not to do that, too, but the flooding and the too much water and all that, it's better for the environment to keep it in your yard, and it's certainly better than having more than the plant can handle.
Okay, thank you
I'm ready
for
to start training people now.
Thank you, Pat. Okay, again, Mr. Herrera, thank you so much for the report. Mr. Weil, thank you very much. We move on to item 8, new business. We moved item 8C above item 8A. So item 8C, consideration of amending the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department Joint Powers Authority Agreement. Mr. Weiss?
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, the item before you is a proposed third amendment to the restated Joint Powers Agreement with the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department. As you will recall, in 2007, the City of San Carlos and the Fire District within Belmont renegotiated the Joint Powers Agreement. As part of that renegotiation, the funding formula was changed. Previously to 2007, the funding formula was split 50-50, the district paying 50%, the city paying 50%. Through the amended and restated development agreement in 2007, that formula was changed, predicated upon 4 factors: population, call volume, fire stations, and the assessed valuation within the jurisdiction of each member agency. A factor of 25% was given to each of those 4 criteria. The end result of that new formula was that then the City of San Carlos moving forward paid a higher share of the total cost for the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department. It resulted, as you can see from the report, in an increase in the city's share upwards from 52 now to 53+%, corresponding decrease in the City of Belmont. And our share for fire department expenses just in the last 3 years, since 2007, has gone up 19.5%, whereas that increase has been less than 5% for the City of Belmont. The issue has been discussed by the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department over the last couple of months. Mayor Grisilli brought it to the board's attention. There are provisions within the Joint Powers Agreement that would indicate that the provisions of the JPA are to be revisited within a 4-year period. And the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department has adopted a motion that would alter the factors in such a way that the population factor would be reduced from 25% to 15%, and the assessed valuation factor would be reduced from 25 to 15%. Call volume in fire stations would be increased from 25 to 35%. The net result, based upon current data, today's data, would be a small, nearly a 1% decrease to the City of San Carlos. And this motion was passed by the Belmont San Carlos Fire Board on a 3-1 vote. We have drafted, or I should say the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department has drafted and amended and restated development agreement incorporating that new formula within it. That document is before you this evening. So if the council wishes, you could authorize staff to approve, or I actually think it's set up for the mayor's signature to approve that particular agreement. I would say that we haven't run it by special counsel yet, but I'm not anticipating any problem there, but we would like to at least cover that as a technicality. But the recommendation is that the City Council authorize approval of the third amended and restated joint exercise of powers agreement for the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department, adjusting the funding formula. Mr. Mayor?
I'd just like to add, Mr. Weiss, that if the council does approve it, it has to go to the Belmont Fire District for their approval also before it would become part of the Joint Powers Agreement. So it's a two-part situation. Questions for Mr. Weiss? Nobody has any questions? Okay. Okay, then nobody has any questions. We have a couple of people who would like to speak on this issue. First person is Andy Klein. I'd like to keep all the comments on these to approximately 2 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council. First off, I would like to say thank you to our fire department. I believe they are not given the due respect that they deserve. As someone whose childhood home was burnt down in a fire, I am thankful, and I believe this discussion about a volunteer fire department is ridiculous. Look what happened to Auburn. They lost 69 homes with their volunteer fire department. I would rather have professionals do the job and save lives. And unfortunately, during this discussion, they're the ones who get thrown under the bus. They're the ones who will be disrespected during this discussion, and they're the ones who will not be thought about. But I think if you're to approve this new JPA agreement, you need to answer 3 questions, and you need to answer all 3 as yes. The first is assessed valuation a legitimate cost? Should we pay more for our fire department because our property is worth more? I believe that's a no. Second, will the Belmont City Council approve this? I believe they will wait until December and they will say no, and that'll be another black eye for our city. 3, is this a fair deal? I believe that is no. We were told in this last election cycle that it's immoral to pay for someone else to pay for our services. We are paying for Belmont services. I would like to know where that moral indignation is now. I would like you to send this back to Belmont and say it's either going to be a fair deal or it's no deal at all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Mr. Klein. Pat Bell?
I could go on and on about fire, as you know. And I think there are 2 ways to look at this. Number one, we use more services. We have more call volume. Each city has 2 stations, and it costs so much to staff those stations, by the trucks and the engines and the yada, yada, yada. That's what Mr. Grisilli calls fixed costs. Okay, that's 50-50. But then if you look at usage, we'd be paying 60%. So I think we have to admit that we use more fire services than Belmont does, and we probably ought to pay more for more of the cost of the fire department. But whether you think that's true or not, the reality is, if you tell Belmont, we want 50-50 or we're not going to make a deal, and they say, fine, then what are you going to do? We went through this 3 years ago. You're going to go shopping for a better deal. You're not going to find a better deal. It's going to cost you more than going with this proposed JPA agreement, and it's going to drag out and talk about black eyes. It's going to be ugly. I went through it last time. Mr. Grocott and Mr. Grisilli went through it last time. And at the end, when the council was trying to decide whether to grit their teeth and hold their noses and vote for the JPA, Mr. Grisilli said, right or wrong, it's the best deal we can get. And you can say, if you want to get hormonal and say to Belmont, we're not going to pay more than you pay, go ahead. But you're going to pay more than you're paying now if you do it that way, because you can't start your own fire department for that price. And if you contract out to another city, you lose a lot of local control, number one, and you pay more. So just a little reality check.
Thank you, Ms. Bell. Okay. Gentlemen?
Well, through the chair, I personally would like to hear from you guys been on the fire board. You've heard the debates and discussions, philosophies. I'd love to hear where you guys are coming from on this.
Okay. Mr. Grocott, you want to go first? Or?
Sure. Especially sitting on the when you're sitting on the fire board, you have to look at this as a fire board commissioner. So, what I've done during those meetings, I've tried to remove myself from, concerns about San Carlos or being worried about Belmont. And my concerns at that point are for the fire department itself. And then when you come to the discussion of how you fund, number one, I think having a program like we do, where the chief is more in charge and has a budget to work with, as opposed to in the past where he was, whatever Belmont brought in with their fire district monies was matched by San Carlos, and then he was given that money and told just go work with that. Now he has more of a budget that he works with, and it more goes back to the cities and says, and the cities are told, this is what we need to pay. So I do think it's a better system that we've set up. When we set this up, we needed to find some factors to use for a formula. And I was reminded recently that back at the time we were doing this, Belmont actually paid for a consultant to come in and look at, how do you do this? How do you do JPA? What are factors you look at for funding? And they paid for that report, and we piggybacked off of that report as a fire board. And in that report, one of the things that was recommended was to have assessed valuation in the formula, or it was at least offered as a factor that you can use. And we are in another JPA where assessed valuation is used. That's the Office of Emergency Services, is based on, partly, I think, on assessed valuation. So it does come up as a factor. The thing that, quite frankly, that I was looking for was having a number of factors so that you don't lean on any one thing too much for your funding formula. So I think 4 is a good number. The other thing was having something that you can defend and that makes sense, and that's, I think population has an impact. Certainly fixed costs, as Pat Bell talked about with the stations, is a factor. Assessed valuation, in my mind, needed to be in there because you needed, population deals with the city itself, the people who live there, that sort of thing, but it doesn't deal with the businesses that you have, sort of the population, if you will, of your businesses. So there needed to be some other factor in there to deal with that. And then, of course, call volume, talks about how much do you use the fire services and paramedic services and so forth. Understanding that there's a little bit of squish factor in there to some degree because we have the drop boundaries agreement. So that's why those are in there. Originally, when this came up, I was willing to throw out both population and assessed valuation and put in 2 new factors, which would be housing units and business units. Or you could, another way to look at business or commercial would be to look at commercial square footage. But after we discussed the item further, it seemed like rather than throw out the old, half of the old formula entirely and start with something new, it would be better to make some small adjustments. And that's when the discussion came around to, really the big factors here are fixed costs and how much to use those fixed costs. And the smaller factors are perhaps population and assessed valuation. So that's how we arrived at what we did with the 35-35 and 15-15. I felt comfortable with it, and so that's why I voted in favor of it.
So what if you brought commercial square footage and housing units back to the fire board, how would that have changed the 2 percentages?
Well, I think that's one reason it didn't also go over so well is because if you put those factors in there, and we didn't have really good data, although I think Mayor Griselli would agree, the second time we dealt with it, we did have some better data, but it still was not fully studied. But when the factors were thrown in, it was actually, it would create a more imbalanced situation, and so it didn't look like we would pay even more than we're paying under the current formula. So it didn't look like a
Do your
good
homework before you bring it to the fire board.
Yeah.
You get in that situation.
Yeah. Well, to be fair, though, Councilmember Lewis, what I was trying to do again as a board member of the fire board is the way we had a spreadsheet up, and we said let's look more at the left side of the spreadsheet, which are the factors, and not so much look at the right side of the spreadsheet, which is what are the results of those factors. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, what you want to be able to do is not necessarily say how much are we paying, but can you justify these factors?
Right, but you were actually going on both sides of the equation when you were representing that, so that's the only reason I was bringing it back up.
Fair enough.
You're playing both sides of the column.
Well, I'm not trying to.
Back to you. That's all.
Well, I wasn't trying to play both sides of the column, but certainly as a fire board, once we saw the results, we do realize to some degree it's a political issue, and you have to also face the political issue at some point. So.
Well, my thought on this is I was the one who initiated the conversation. The Joint Powers Agreement allows for review of the entire agreement, which I think is one of the best things we had in it when we wrote it up three and a half years ago, is that we had a chance every 3 or 4 years to look at it. Because what I'm finding in some of these Joint Powers Agreements is they get created in any, whether it's the fire board or library board or sewer board or wherever, and they just seem to there forever. And needless to say, things change. So I was the one who brought up the point of reviewing it, and in that review, looking at the 4 factors. I have to respectfully disagree with Councilmember Grocott. I really believe assessed valuation is a, and I voted for this last time, 4 years ago when we had it. No question I did. For the compromise and for the betterment of the community to make sure that we kept our fire department together. But after 4 years of looking at it, what I looked at is the call volume is one of the most important things that generates what our usage is, and ours is the last couple of 3 years higher than Belmont's. Fire stations, that's a fixed cost, which again, we are both paying for. And population, we are a bigger population by a margin, a small margin. When you throw assessed valuation in, to me, it skews the entire equation in that you have a house, whether it's a house that's worth $1 or worth $1 million. If there's a call to that house and there's a fire, it doesn't cost the fire department. It might cost the homeowner money, but it's not necessarily going to cost the fire department anymore. To depending on where there's square footages of homes in certain areas in San Carlos or Belmont that are the same, or should I say, are worth more or less depending on where they are. And I just didn't feel that idea really worked together. I know Mr. Grocott indicated the business thing. Most of our calls, 93%, and the Chief is here to correct me if I'm wrong, approximately 93% or so, over 90% of the calls that we have are emergency calls. They're not fire calls. So if you have a building, whether it's worth a gazillion dollars or worth $1, if you have a call for, let's say, a heart attack, the fire department's going to respond. Just because the building's worth more doesn't mean that there's more cost being involved or we're spending more. It's an emergency call. If the things were reversed, if we had 90% fire and 10% emergency calls, moot, assessed valuation, I'm in with it. It doesn't work that way. And I think we have to realize that our fire department is also emergency responders. And that really primarily is what they have been doing for at least the 4 years that I've been paying attention to it. When this came up, and we had a good discussion with the members of Belmont, very polite and professional discussion, and we went back and forth on these items, and we voted 3-1 to approve the new percentages that Mr. Weiss indicated. I voted against it because I felt that we could do better with the percentage, and I felt I had to make at least a statement that I felt assessed valuation wasn't there. That was approximately a month ago when we did this. I would like to hear from the other members of the council what they feel relative to the new percentage. And if we do pass it, then we would go back again. As I said, Belmont has to decide whether they want to participate in this new adjustment or not, and we would get their input from the entire fire board / council as opposed to just 2 members of it. So anyway, I hope I answered some of your questions, Mr. Lewis. Yeah. But I'd be happy to listen to other folks' comments or questions or whatever else. So. Mr. Ahmad, you want to start?
Sure. Mr. Mayor, just a few comments. One point about tonight's discussion is we are not, what is not on the agenda is the professionalism or the quality of care that we are getting from the fire department. We think they're great. These are professionals. They deserve to be treated as such, but that's not the issue in front of us. What is in front of us is the deal. When I first got elected, I actually went to Mr. Grocott's favorite coffee shop, sat down with him, and had him go through the history of the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department. What a goat rodeo. To say it's a messed up relationship is, there needs to be counselors put into this, and everybody needs a timeout. But frankly, one of the things that
not to interrupt you, but it has been better the last 2 years, just to let you know. I've been at the meetings.
Happy to hear that, Mr. Mayor. But one of the things that has to be described when you are doing a partnership is, are we with the right partner? One of the points that has to be addressed, Belmont has a special fire district to pay for fire. 2 times the citizens of San Carlos had the question before them, would they want to pay for it? 2 times it was rejected. Specifically to use verbiage that Mr. Grocott had put to us a year before, that he believed that a threshold for taking money from somebody because If you take money from people, you are taking their liberty, and there should be a 2/3 to do so. He was fairly emphatic about that. Twice that measure has failed, and the voters spoke in clear terms that however you want to take it, but the cost for that fire was not going to be supported by the people in terms of their taxes. Belmont does. They run a surplus in their fire budget, so much so that they actually borrow from their fire budget to cover their general fund deficits. So we've got a partner that has a very different funding schedule, and that beats us up. Mr. Mayor, I think assessed value, especially in terms that when you look at our call volume, it's the big majority is medical. It's not fire. I have spoken previously about how San Mateo County does first responder. It's interesting to note that the way we do our first responder by sending out fire trucks was developed by France. So if folks want to beat up everybody about socialized medicine and what the French do, well, guess what? This is where it came from. So you get a French fire truck out there followed by the woo-woo-woo ambulance. Yeah, now we're copying that and wondering where the money is going. I will not support an agreement that has assessed value in it.
Okay.
With that, I'll yield.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lewis?
Well, there's been a lot of changes in the last 4 years. That's the bottom line. We got into a deal on this, I think, given it all of our very, very best efforts. And the bottom line is, I think on this, these four factors, this is the formula we agreed on, and we decided to give it a shot. Costs up nearly 20% in 2.5 years. That's a frightening number for San Carlos. It's much more frightening in light of the failure of the Measure U. Not a position that any of us, I think, wanted to be in, but it's the position we're in. Across the board, the city's going to have to be looking at 8 to 10% cost reductions. And fire can no longer, it just can't be treated as a special case scenario. It's got to be treated like every other department. And agree with all the other council members. This has nothing to do with the quality of our fire department, our service, what we've done, and what we've attempted to do in the last 4 years. Councilmember Ahmad points out rightly, we have a partner that's got basically a trust fund for fire. And we have a city that's not willing to support anything that amounts to additional taxes or amounts to supporting the fire department. And I'm the messenger on that. We've seen that time and again in every election cycle over the last 6 years. So whether we like it or not, it's a big wake-up call to everybody here. And something's got to change. There's just, unfortunately, something has to change. This is not affordable, and it's not sustainable. And we've tried on this. We all went into, you go into an agreement and you have compromises, obviously. For me, compromises were population and assessed valuation. Those were my compromises that I said, well, hey, let's give this thing a try. Our population difference doesn't demand different number of trucks and number of personnel and so forth. So to me, it's not really a mitigating factor. Call volume is important. Number of fire stations. And those are the things. Those are costs, and those are, I think, the things that should be the factors, and that's what we should talk about. I mean, honestly, in the grand scheme of things, I agree that you have to look at this holistically as the San Carlos and Belmont Fire District. I'm not so sure San Carlos and Belmont shouldn't actually consider an entire municipal consolidation. We have two small communities side by side, and I don't know if where funding is going across the board, whether or not either of us have sustainable models. We have redundancy in staffs. And if you think about even in negotiation positions in broader JPAs and regional JPAs, we'd be stronger unified as one municipality and stand on our own 2 feet alongside Redwood City and San Mateo in a broader sense. But that's perhaps for another discussion that I think this council should consider in the future. Because I do think we get into this slightly petty Hatfield-McCoy's thing with our neighbors, and there's no reason to do that. I mean, we have the same concerns and same issues, and it really gets down to politicians and power games that have nothing to do with fire safety. And it's a shame that we get into this. But all we can look at is what do we have for funding, what can we really afford, and where does this current formula, where is it doing us wrong? And it's not from the position necessarily of Fire Board. We're doing this as the city of San Carlos. And this doesn't work. So to me, we have a couple of decisions tonight. One is we'll take this. It's an offer coming to us from the Fire Board. It's progress in the right direction. And then for my money, we would also send you guys back to the Fire Board to say it's still not sustainable. It's still not affordable. And we need to go to that next step, or we simply have to look at a different answer.
Okay.
That's
Thank you. Mr. Royce?
Well, first, I'd like just to qualify myself. I don't feel I have the breadth of experience that a couple of our council people have with fires. I don't totally understand it, but with my finance experience, I think I could give a fresh look to where we are. I mean, the only thing I know, I've gotten great safety service in our city, both police and fire. Now that I'm on council, like Council Member Lewis has mentioned, you realize how much it costs. We spend $12 million on fire, and it's growing fast. And to control our costs and reduce our costs, we can't avoid not looking at safety. We need to look at every component of our city's general fund. So I used my experience of a lot of cost accounting and looking at cost drivers in a semiconductor fab, where you really try to price out your products and what's really driving your cost. And I'll use an example, because I'll try to get away from the emotion of a fire department. I'm going to start a 24-hour plumbing service. And I'm going to have staff and a facility and equipment, and I'm going to guarantee for a customer base, be it City of San Carlos, a 10-minute response rate. You see water coming out your front door or out your garage, you call me, I'll take care of it. And so I staff and equip and build a cost structure to provide to a certain size customer base a level of service. And my cost in that situation is basically fixed. Number of calls, increased calls don't change it. A lot of factors that you get into costing all this other stuff in cost accounting really doesn't apply anymore. And in fact, my plumbing service will also have a situation where I may get 10 calls per day is what I built my model on. Well, some days I only get a couple calls. Well, guess what? The city next door, or my uncle next door with the other plumbing service, I go and help him. Or some days I'm inundated with 15 calls and I can't handle it. Well, I go to my uncle with the other business. That's a slow day for him, so he helps out. And so when you look at really cost drivers, my first point is we are in a situation because we have a customer base, a defined customer base, a defined level of service. It is a square box, fixed cost. No matter what you do to it, you're going to spend $12 million. And so you can't adjust your cost. It's pretty much the way it is. And I use that example. I'll go through the four factors. Population, I think that comes closest to what your customer base is. And I think there's some really good points made that 7% of our calls are fire. I believe 75% are medical or medical assist. The more people you have, the more calls you're going to get. I think that's really truly a great factor. Call volume, to me, is almost the same, but there's a danger in call volume because there are situations, there is even current situations in our JP now when some cities get multiple calls from a facility. They'll go down and kind of beat up those people and say, hey, you shouldn't be calling us all the time on 911. And that would be the last thing that I would want to do. I think if someone feels faint or something's not right or they smell smoke, call 911. Don't fool around with call volume. And if we use that as a factor, you need to know that every call costs between $3,000 to $4,000. And if I start talking now to the TV and the web and people listening and start asking people, you could start playing lots of games. And I don't want to play any games with calling. I want people to not even hesitate. I want them to call 911 without a doubt. And so population, yes. Call volume, I have problems. And where it impacts San Carlos is we have 4 factors. Well, population and call volume are kind of one and the same. Well, we have more population, of course, we have more calls. It's almost matched. Well, we're getting hit higher for 2 of the factors. I think there should be 1 factor, not 2, because we're getting double hit with both of those, which to me are very much the same. Fire stations, no one talked about that, but if you talk to anybody on how to cut cost or how to increase cost, it all gets to the fire station. When I made that example of a plumbing service to provide a facility, that's when you need, and the fire department too, you need to staff it. There's trucks, there's facilities. All your cost drivers are basically based on a per station. You open up another station, you just double your cost. So maybe that makes sense. And I will agree with most of the people on the council. I've asked a lot of people over the last week, what does assessed value have to do with fighting a fire? Of course, fires are, again, 7%. What does assessed value have to do with handling medical emergencies in San Carlos? We could say our people are more valued than Belmont. That's not true. People are people. And so I have not heard an explanation. And actually, assessed value is the biggest contributor to us paying a premium. We pay an extra 7 percentage points compared to Belmont right now under the current model. That 7 points is equivalent to $850,000. We pay more than Belmont. Well, we're larger. We have more people. Again, some of these I think can make sense. But assessed value is 4.5 points of the 7 points. Just assessed value. Population is 1.25. Call volume is 1.25. We're getting doubled up. It becomes 2.5. I think if I like things very simple. To me, again, in summary, assessed value has no logic at all, and I think we're getting double hit on population and call volume, and I wouldn't touch call volume. So in summary, I would like to say, though, the JPA organization does work well. So we need to try to make it work. And the other point that I will make, which kind of gets into more what we're supposed to be talking about this evening, is there's a proposal to adjust these rules so that rather than paying 7%, we go down to 5.25%. We save about our budget about $110,000. Okay, we're paying an extra $850,000. We're talking about saving a little more than $100,000. And Warren Lieberman of the Belmont City Council, I respect him a lot. I've tried to attend some fire board meetings, and at the last meeting he spoke. And
situation, and and it's a little bit like that. How do you take, two cities, different
I get
sizes,
that.
different
I guess
service, a little
my
bit.
sense is that we're leveraged in our relationship with Belmont because they have funding, we don't have funding. So it's not really, it's not necessarily a fair deal for us, but it's the best deal that we can get. The best deal for us, and I suggest that if we went to these other cities, Redwood City and San Mateo, we wouldn't have assessed valuation. It wouldn't be a component of it. So it's just, we got the deal done because we wanted stability, and now we need to keep pressing to the next point. And I'm disappointed in all the discussion we had that the fire board hasn't been continuing to press in that direction. But anyway, we're not at an affordable point anymore. Something's got to change.
I would say that we if there's a motion, I'd entertain a motion on the floor.
I'd like to make another thought.
Okay, I'm sorry. In a second.
Yeah, just one other thought here. I think the situation here is we have two of the council members here who are on the board, and their recommendation is kind of a split vote. There was one for this and one against it. And I think Mayor Griselli was the one that was against it. I think he was trying to push for something more than $100,000. I think I heard everybody on this side speak about assessed value just doesn't belong, and I spoke that assessed value.
San Carlos is a city known for embracing good, safe, and healthy living. Now one of only a handful of cities in the county to pilot a green business program, it has already awarded certified green status to several local firms that implement sound environmental practices.
I would like to send our two board people back and say, not enough. And I'd rather have nothing, but I think we need to do what's right here and push hard. And not aggravate, the JPA. Again, I know we need to work with people, and that's where you're closest because that's a tough job. You have to work with two other people. But I throw that out to other members of the council. Do we just accept it or do fight on?
Through the chair.
Go ahead.
A couple of points. It was suggested by Councilmember Royce that perhaps we get double hit because of population and call volume. My caution on any of these factors is if you narrow it down to 2 factors or 3 factors, whatever, 4 is a nice number because it's not too complex, but it avoids spiking.
So I'm not recommending changing that. I'm only talking about assessed value.
Well, fine. So
I just brought it up as a point.
Okay.
It's only assessed value.
But I did want to address that. If you reduce the factors too much, you can have spike situations, especially with something like call volume. Could 1 year go way up, and suddenly you're paying a bunch of money because of that. Assessed valuation, while it may not be the perfect factor, it does. Again, I believe there needs to be something in there that addresses the commercial side, number one. Number two, you put things in place. If we had nothing but tents, we might develop a certain kind of fire department. But if you have complex buildings, especially in the commercial end, there's things that are needed, equipment that's needed. We have even hazmat. Now that we serve the whole county, but we have more reason in San Carlos for hazmat than Belmont does because we have more industrial, and we have more industrial that has hazmat needs.
Those things can happen. You could have an accident anywhere. But anyway, go ahead.
That's true. But if we were building a fire department up from the ground from scratch, you would look at what do you have that needs to be protected, and then have the equipment for it. So maybe, again, assessed valuation may not be the perfect factor, but you have to have something in there to address some of these issues of, it's not only the calls you get, It's the calls you may get. It's the potentiality that you have to also
Well, it
look
doesn't
at.
spike if
Okay.
you agree to
Okay.
set percentages either.
Okay,
so.
we've really kicked this around. I personally, you talk about fighting. You said the perfect words for me. Go and fight another day, and I like that idea. I like Mr. Lewis's idea. I like your idea. I mean, I was the one who voted against this at the fire board because I wanted to get a better deal. But $110,000 or $120,000 is $110,000 or $120,000. Plus, it gives us the opportunity to listen to the Belmont folks talk about this. If we do not pass this tonight, we don't hear 5 people talk. We only hear 2 people talk. I think we should, as you mentioned, live to fight another, or go fight another day. Added on to what Mr. Lewis said. If we pass this thing and vote for it, whatever the vote is, and then say with the add-on saying, but we want to go back and look at a regional thing. We're not giving up. We're not saying these are all magic, untouchable things or whatever. We want to go back and keep working on it. Whether it's this percentage or whether I like the regional idea better than going directly back to it. But that's how I think we need to. At least that gives the opportunity for us to listen to the folks in Belmont and what they have to say. They may love everything we said tonight, and they may go, we don't even want to talk about it. Go jump in the lake. I don't know what 3 of them are going to do. 2 of them we agreed that we're going to vote for it, but whether the other 3 folks want to talk about it or whether they think they're all wet, I don't know. So anyway, I'd entertain a motion for this item.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, I'm going to push back on that. We know they're going to have a new council. There are going to be changes.
Okay,
I would agree with you. I would prefer a better deal. I'm not going to support this deal.
That'd be fine, Mr. Ramad. I'm not trying to, but I mean, I'd entertain a motion, either approve or disapprove the item.
Mayor, I will make the motion that we approve the proposal as offered by the Belmont San Carlos Fire Department.
Okay, with any other add-on, as Mr. Lewis's comments of trying to go back and work on a more regional situation and continue to push for a different way that we pay for our fire services. I don't mean to put. If you don't want to do that, that's up to you.
No, that's fine. I'm wondering if we should, if that might be advisable to do as a separate motion, so that we have this clean, that we've approved this, but we also have a
Let's look at
motion.
the city attorney.
Yeah.
I was sort of trying to.
You have an option to provide additional direction. That's the third option on the agenda. But
We do.
it's not actually necessary to do that, but you could do an instruction to your board members to talk about it. So
Yeah, and I
it
would-
could be a separate resolution. It could be incorporated in the resolution, the motion that's before.
Well, I personally think it carries more weight if we have it right together with it. In other words, that we're trying to, we're sort of part and parcel with this. We approve this item, but we are not satisfied. Might not be the correct word. We want to continue to push to see if we can do a better thing for both cities, not just for one city or
Mr.
the
Mayor,
other.
so I will leave my motion as stated. If Mr. Lewis maybe wants to add an amendment to it, because he's the one, it was his idea, and he might be able to put it in better words.
I appreciate that.
So I'll leave it at that.
There's a procedural issue here.
Okay.
That'll affect how I second this motion.
Okay.
All right, which is the idea you're offering is if we add additional language to it. I'd like to hear where Belmont consider this straight up without, I wouldn't want them to say, well, because there's other things.
Okay. Fine.
In addition to this motion, we're not going to give this full consideration because there are other issues. So,
All right.
I'd like to we'll offer a second motion with direction to the fire board.
Okay, so the first motion is to approve this item. Is there a second to that motion?
I second that motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve this item and go back to the fire board with that vote. Or I guess it basically goes. It would then move on to Belmont. I guess that's the procedure to move on to Belmont's fire district. So it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this item?
Mr. Mayor, once again, I think my vote is going to be fairly clear. One of the things that I do when you look at and try to evaluate different proposals, one of the things you do in programming is you look at the number of ifs. How many times does a program say if in it? Because that's considered an exception. When Councilman Grocott was describing the issues of putting together the JPA, I counted 6 ifs. If this happens, and if this happens, and if this happens, and if this happens, you start to get down to some fairly interesting use cases. I'm not satisfied with this deal. I want to see our fire board representatives represent San Carlos. And go back and do a better job. I yield.
I don't know that anybody's satisfied with the deal, but I agree. Go ahead. Okay, any other comments? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
No.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
No.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. Okay, is there a second motion on the floor?
Yeah, I'd like to, and we can work on wordsmithing this together a little bit, but I'd like to propose a motion that we give direction to the fire board members to pursue a regional solution to our fire, for a JPA to pursue a regional, and also that this doesn't go far enough, that we will need, in order to be in a sustainable, affordable place, that the funding formula needs to be scrutinized in such a way to be acceptable to the to continue to be adjusted.
Okay,
You can clarify that. I'm just
Yeah.
trying to capture the spirit of what I think
Sure.
we're talking about tonight.
I'm trying to, in my own mind, do that.
I have a question, if I may.
Mm-hmm.
As a matter of discussion on Mr. Lewis's point. So are you looking for, are you looking for simply San Carlos to pay less, or are you looking for factors that can be put into a formula that can be more justified?
Both.
Both, okay.
Both, and I actually think our best leverage is to go together to the region and not to try to get into the same old argument we're going to have.
Well, I would suggest to you that if we're going to go broader, you're only going to get into these issues even more, because as you go to other agencies and ask to partner, these things are going to come up.
Well, I don't think you're going to make any headway in this. I got to be honest with you. You're not going to make headway. We're going to be right back in the same position. We're going to have the same discussion. So what I'm suggesting is, you know, that, and again, I'm just trying to a motion where I think you need to pursue a regional solution, because I don't think that a reduced funding formula is ultimately going to, I don't think that dog's going to hunt, given what our partnership situation is.
Well, that's why I was asking that you sort of added that at the second part of your motion, and I wasn't sure that you really wanted to do it that way. I just wanted to.
So how would you like to help me? Help me, because I think you guys are going back.
I'm thinking. Trust me.
Okay. I was just. I'm hearing two things, though. That the council, I think, in majority, doesn't feel like assessed valuation is an element of the funding formula. So I was suggesting that needs to be looked at, and then direction to pursue a regional, as a JPA, pursue a regional solution. So those were the two things I was trying to capture.
Would you, if I may, Mr. Mayor, would you like to have some digging into why assessed valuation was put in there in the first place? Again, that came from that did come from a consultant that.
No, I think there's plenty of paper history
that.
on that, and if people are interested, we've done that work. And anyway, so what's the hesitancy on taking a look at the funding formula?
No. It just seemed like we approved. I don't have one. I like the regional outlook of it.
Yes.
And if we want to go back, we've just approved an item that we changed the funding formula.
Yes.
We want to go back and continue to work on it.
Yes.
Okay, fine. Go ahead and make your motion. Then I understand.
So that is the motion.
Could you say that again?
Sure. That to provide direction to the fire board to go back and to pursue a regional formula as a JPA, as one entity, and then to continue to look at the funding formula components in such a way that certainly
or equalization.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this motion?
I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I'm still struggling to understand what it is we're being asked to do.
Well, we don't like the assessed valuation part of the funding formula, so we would like you
that.
guys to talk about that, representing the city of San Carlos.
To look for other factors, or just to kick it out altogether?
I would trust that you guys know the different components to talk about. You've heard the discussion tonight. We're asking you to take it back and come back with the formula that works better for the council.
And it could include other factors?
Could include
additional
other factors, but wouldn't
okay.
include.
And then the other part of your motion is that we should look for a broader regional approach by either looking to San Mateo or Redwood City or both, if we could.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now's the time.
Okay.
Woodside or.
Yeah. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this?
Mr. Mayor, I may here to offer an amendment. There's been there was discussion from public comment that made an allegation that this is the best deal we're going to get. I don't know that. I haven't seen any evidence to say this is the best deal I can get. I would like to see something from staff saying that there aren't other deals outside of this JPA that may be more effective or cheaper. So to that extent, I will offer an amendment directing staff to look at other options outside of the JPA.
We don't have a, Mr. Mayor, procedure.
That's my motion.
We don't
There's
have
either a second or not.
Well, we don't have a second on the first motion yet, I don't
I'll
believe.
second it. Yes, you do. I seconded the first, and I seconded the amendment.
All right, Mr. Rubens, I want to make sure I'm doing this right, so guide me along here.
We're taking a broader.
Well, the second, the amendment motion takes precedence. You vote on that one, and then you, if that one passes, then there's no need to go back to the first one.
There's no need to
no, you would still vote on the primary.
He's offering an amendment, not
Okay,
replacement.
you're right. I misunderstood that. Well, I thought the amendment was incorporating the entire action you'd want to take. So you're right. The amendment would amend the first motion, and then you'd go back to the primary motion.
That was the intent, yes, sir.
Okay. So we go to the amended part first. Okay? Does everybody understand what we're voting on here?
The amendment.
Omar's.
Want to say it one more time?
Again, Mr. What the issue was, there was discussion that stated this is the best deal that is available at San Carlos. What I wanted was to direct staff to look at options outside of the JPA for both quality of service and for price.
Can we have discussion on that item?
Sure we can. Just a second. Let me make sure we get the, so it's been moved and seconded, and that's the amendment to the motion. Okay, sure.
Okay, it wasn't so very long ago that we did exactly that when we were looking to put together this fire department or discard it and go to some other kind of partnership. We've been through that. At that time, I think what we found was that we were not going to get any better deals. And even the one that potentially looked like a better deal was CDF, but shortly thereafter that, CDF did negotiations with their union, and their price structure went up. So, you know, I don't think there are any better deals out there. I think the speaker was pretty accurate. And furthermore, if we are going to direct staff to do that, we need to keep in mind that, you know, staff spending time on these things like this, it's not free. So I would vote against it.
Okay. Any other comments?
So I don't understand what we're voting on. We're voting on that amended motion, and then what about the other motion?
We
we're
go back
also gonna vote?
to your motion.
Then.
Is that correct, Mr. Rubens? Okay.
That's correct.
All right, so we'll call the question on the amended motion, or the amendment
to the motion.
To the motion. All right. All right, any further comments? Hearing none. Ms. Boland.
Councilmember Mod?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. All right, now we go back to the original motion. All right? And we understand what the original motion is? Mr.
The original
Rubens.
motion now incorporates both ideas.
Okay, both ideas. Okay, thank you, Mr. Rubens. All right, so I'll call the question. Ms. Boland?
Councilmember Mod?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Excuse me, I have a question for Mr. Rubens based on what he just said. So to vote yes would be to vote yes on Mr. Lewis's proposal and
as it has been amended.
As it has been amended, then no.
That's correct. Yeah.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. Okay. Thank you, gentlemen, very much. Appreciate that.
Good job.
All right. So we move on to new business item 8A, consideration of repealing the existing sign ordinance, municipal code, chapter 18.150, and the October 26, 2009 urgency ordinance number 1411, and adopting a new urgency ordinance regulating signs in the city of San Carlos. Mr. Rubens.
Mr. Mayor, council members, this item is a follow-up to an item you heard last meeting, except now that we're replacing repealing the old urgency ordinance that you enacted last time and replacing it with a new urgency ordinance, and also repealing the city's existing sign ordinance and replacing it with what is now a comprehensive sign ordinance attached to this urgency ordinance. The new ordinance here is going to last for 45 days, just like we talked about last time. It requires a 4/5 vote of the council to be approved. The idea is that there will be a more permanent ordinance using the ordinary standard procedures brought to you at your next meeting, which would then be introduced and then adopted at the following meeting. This ordinance is intended to address some of the issues that came about in the litigation, to create an ordinance that accomplishes the goals of the city in banning all new billboards with a new definition for billboard. We include constitutional provisions, message substitution, which allows for substitution of messages once there's a legal sign in place. It eliminates all the rules related to political campaign election signs, which was an issue in the lawsuit. It allows for political and other non-commercial messages to be displayed under that message substitution provision at any time in any zoning district on any, and again on any legal sign. We also have some policy discussion in this that I should add that staff and our special counsel worked really diligently to get this comprehensive urgency ordinance to you with all those provisions. We have some restrictions on pole signs to limit them to the 101 corridor, and existing legal signs will become legally non-conforming. They'll be allowed to be there as long as they're not changed from their current use. Again, this is, I should state that this is not intended to run afoul of the judge's TRO in the case. We're going to continue, pursuant to her orders, to process the application of the plaintiff in the case, but we're reserving all of our legal and equitable defenses. We think there's a strong legal issue with regard to vested rights that will be dispositive in the case.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Rubens. Questions for Mr. Rubens on this item? Okay. There's no questions. I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to introduce ordinance number
1412.
urgency ordinance pursuant to Government Code 65858A, repealing the existing sign ordinance at Municipal Code Chapter 18.150 and the October 26, 2009 urgency ordinance, Ordinance 1411, and adopting a new urgency ordinance regulating signs in the city of San Carlos.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Further discussion on this matter? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Gasoli?
Yes, thank you. Item 8B, consideration of adopting a resolution of intention regarding enactment of an urgency ordinance.
This is a follow-up resolution to create an independent statement of intention of the council to follow through on the adoption of the permanent ordinance and the permanent new sign ordinance. It's been recommended by our council that we adopt this resolution, and I recommend that the city council adopt the resolution.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Rubens? Hearing none, I entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move adoption of resolution number
2009-87.
resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos for the intention regarding enactment of urgency ordinance.
Okay, any discussion on this? Pardon me, is there a second? I apologize.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion on this? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Gasoli?
Yes. All right, we handled 8C. We move down to 8D. Consideration of recommendation by the Park and Recreation Commission to grant a waiver of the non-resident fee to the San Carlos Tennis Club for a period of 2 years. Mr. Long?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. As part of the 2009-2010 fee schedule, there was a fee established to charge tennis organizations for the use of reservations of city-owned courts. In concert with that was the development of a use policy, and the use policy governed our city-owned courts. And it defined what non-residents are. And the use fees are identified as $10 for resident organizations and $15 for non-resident organizations per court per hour. The Parks and Recreation Commission approved the tennis court use policy. However, they did indicate that they wanted to waive the non-resident fee for the San Carlos Tennis Club. Their reasoning is that the San Carlos Tennis Club has been around for some 40 years, and they would want them to have opportunity to adjust to the new fee as they were paying zero before that. The only fees that they paid were for tournaments only. So they recommended to council for consideration a waiver of those fees for a period of 2 years. The staff recommends that the waiver not be granted. Should be for obvious reasons now. We need the revenue, and of course it does set a precedent for other sports organizations to ask for a waiver. The threshold for defining resident or non-resident fees is 50% of the membership. At least 50% needs to be residents of San Carlos. And I'll entertain any questions you may have about this request.
Questions for Mr. Long?
I have a question that you can rein me in, Mr. Mayor, if it's off topic, but...
Oh, I will.
Yeah, I know. Is there any discussion going on with the group and through the Parks and Rec Commission to create a situation whereby if you want to use a tennis court, you have to belong to their club, and they have more control of the courts, more they take control more of the maintenance costs and so forth. I know they do a lot already. I mean, they replace nets and do other things and take care of courts and help us out in that regard. But to make it a situation where if you want to play tennis and you don't have a court in your own backyard, join the tennis club and kind of build up their membership and give them more control of the courts. You would still need, of course, some courts available to the general public for pickup, but, because when someone's just a little interested in maybe playing tennis, they want a place to go. But if you're then going to take up the sport, it's a little bit like golf. Go join a club. Pay the rate. Is there any discussion in that regard? And the reason I ask the question is because if there is some discussion in that regard, I'd be more inclined to go with what they're recommending on a short-term basis, maybe rather than 2 years, do it for a year and see how it works. With the discussion that we want to give you more control of the courts, and you pay for it, and you charge the fees to your club that you need to pay for the courts and upkeep them and so forth. And we kind of let go of them a little bit.
You mean kind of force people to join their club if they want to play tennis regularly? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm suggesting, yes.
Wow, that sounds communist.
Well, regardless of whether it's whatever it sounds like, could you just answer the question in a short burst? So to
Yes,
speak?
I will. Initially, there were some discussions a long time ago, but subsequent to that, they have entered into an agreement with the San Carlos School District to use the Arundel courts, and have indicated to me that they were no longer going to have any demands for our city courts at this time. So there are no discussions going on regarding San Carlos Tennis Club and our Parks and Recreation Commission or myself regarding that shared services.
Okay.
All right, so we have an issue before us. So do we have a motion?
Is there a resolution? Or?
What do we? It says either approve the recommendation or approve the staff recommendation. So those are, or provide staff with alternative action.
Well, I'm happy to have more discussion, but I'll make a motion to approve staff's recommendation not to grant a San Carlos Tennis Club a fee waiver.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
So I moved and seconded. Further discussion on this matter?
Well, I just want to.
Sure.
It's obviously council's all aware of the same things here. I mean, that the populace has spoken, and so we have to treat all things fairly. And I'm frankly. I'm a little surprised by the tenor. Councilmember Grocott, I know you didn't support Measure U, and I don't mean to make this big deal, but tonight with fire, let's make it more expensive. Tennis courts, let's do a fee waiver. And I just want to say that the message is to cut costs. I'm waiting to hear it. That's what I thought the tenor. I'm sorry.
All right.
That's my motion.
Okay. It's been your motion. Thank you.
If I may.
No, we don't need to get into it. We already did this. It happened.
How is it that we can have comments from one side and then I can't respond?
I didn't want to have his comment to begin with, Mr. Grocott, so I apologize to you, but I didn't feel it was appropriate to begin with. Okay, so let's go from here.
So thank you very much. I do not get to defend the position.
No,
that I
it's already
stated.
been defended, and it was.
No, it has not been.
Mr. Grocott, I would appreciate that we move on in this meeting, please.
Fine.
Thank you. I appreciate that. All right, we have a motion on the floor. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, can we have a motion? Or was there a second? I didn't.
Yes.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Ms. Boland, roll call.
Councilmember Ahmad.
No.
Councilmember Grocott.
I abstain.
Councilmember Lewis.
Yes.
Councilmember Royce.
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. Okay, item 8E, consideration of adopting a resolution authorizing the filing of an application for Federal American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009 era funding for the Crestview Drive resurfacing project and stating the assurance to complete the project, and I'm leaving the room. Because I have to leave the room because I am disqualified from this item. So let's make sure we. So, Mr. Royce.
I thought you had to go to the bathroom.
No, it's your.
You're allowed.
Robert, please.
He lives within 5
Well,
We'll call you.
this is purely a procedural item. You've essentially taken this action already. You selected this as the project for these cost savings from the ARRA grant. To review, we received an allocation of $559,000 in ARRA funding, or economic stimulus funding. We opened bids on our project for the curb ramp project, and our low bid was around $260,000. Allowing contingency, we have about another $260,000 that we can put to another project. And this was a very good choice. It's a little bit of a race and this is to get your project ready to go out to bid, and this has to be a really shovel-ready project. This was a nice, clean project. I know there were interests in doing other projects, which would have been a little more complicated to do. But we've made great progress getting the plans and specifications together on this, and this is just one other step we need to do is to have a resolution of support to move forward with it.
Questions on this matter?
One question, if I could. Director Weil, in the packet, you also put in an FAQ, and the very last point you put in there, if a street's already in terrible condition, when will it get fixed? And the answer you put in there was, depends on available budget in the gas tax fund. I wanted to get a little clarification. Is that HUTA funds, the highway user tax?
Well, actually, that's a very good question. The gas tax fund actually is not just the HUTA funds. It's where all of our street revenue.
Excuse me, can we avoid the acronyms? And
Yeah,
See, I was going to go through that, but I wanted to.
Yeah, the HUTA stands for Highway User Tax. I don't know what the A is for.
Assessment.
Which is what, when you go to a pump and you buy gas and you pay gas tax, a portion of that comes back to local agencies through that program. So it's not just those monies that come from via the state, but also our Measure A funds that are paid a half-cent sales tax for transportation. A portion of those go to local streets and roads. Any general fund monies that we want to put into streets actually flow through the gas tax fund. So it's almost a misnomer for the fund. It's really like our street fund.
Mr. Royce, the reason I bring this point up, one of the things that is going on at the state level are the HUTA funds are in the crosshairs from the state. At this moment, I believe we still have them. The state is still angling to take them away. That is a big chunk of our ability and Director Weil's ability to repair our streets. So the state is making moves to steal it. We are trying to resist. So I just, you may want to put an asterisk in the FAQ, or I'll leave that to your discretion, obviously, but I wanted to bring that point. Thank you.
And I just have one question, mostly for the sake of the audience, because there's no graphic. Could you just give a brief description of where we're talking about, what the scope of the work?
Certainly, yeah. This project is on Crestview Drive from the city limits near Edgewood Road, which are actually like on Edmonds Court, all the way up to Melody Drive. So up the hill to the last flat spot and then up again. Those limits were selected because it's a project it's a street that is ready for resurfacing. It's an at-risk state, so that if we do timely work on this, we can avoid costly reconstruction of the street. It's a clean project environmentally and easy to design, and it helps bring our overall pavement condition up.
And Mr. Grisilli, I don't think people understood necessarily. Mr. Grisilli recused himself because the project goes in front of his house. So it's just procedural.
He sleeps on the street sometimes, I hear.
Yeah.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Any other questions?
None.
Okay. Hear a motion?
Mr. Royce, I move adoption of resolution number 2009-
88.
Resolution of the City Council of the City of San Carlos authorizing the filling of an application for the Federal American Recovery and Reinvestment Act of 2009 funding for Crestview Drive resurfacing project and stating the assurance to complete the project.
I second.
Have a first and second. Roll call.
Councilmember Ahmad? Yep. Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
And Vice Mayor Royce?
Yes. You want to?
Oh, he was listening. Shh, he's coming back.
Well, that didn't pass. All yours. We're on F.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, move on to item 8F, consideration of introducing an ordinance amending the San Carlos Municipal Code Section 10.32.210 regarding to establish a two-hour parking spaces in the vicinity of 129 Laurel Street. Mr. Weil?
Yes, Mayor and Council, this is a pretty routine item, non-controversial. You could call this taking care of business if you wanted to use a song analogy here.
You're not going to sing, are you?
I'd love to hear it. Yeah.
Oh, no.
Lewis is Hollywood. He can.
Yeah. The business owner here, Mr. Southard, operates a tax preparation business. He's the only business that fronts on this street, and there's a lot of parking on the street, but when he gets there, the parking is normally taken because it's unrestricted. And there's businesses down in El Camino Real, particularly the car wash, that can't park down there. They don't have parking on site, so they park up on this street. So he just needs a couple spaces that are restricted spaces, 2-hour spaces, so that customers of his can get to his business. And it seemed reasonable. The Transportation Circulation Commission thought so, and they recommend approval of it.
Okay. Any discussion or questions on this?
Mr. Mayor, this is sort of a question for the city attorney. I use the services of Mr. Southward and Associates and so forth. I just want to be sure that, is it okay if I mean, he talked to me about the matter early on and so forth. I just want to be sure it's okay if I vote on it.
I don't see that as a conflict because
Okay.
it doesn't
Great.
impact.
I just wanted to disclose to council I would.
You pay him.
Yeah, well, I'd get used to the spaces too, yeah.
Jeez. All right. Is there a motion on this?
Actually, just a question. Director Weil, one of the questions I had was these do have a 2-hour limit. I realize the chief isn't here, but do our parking enforcement folk go down there?
I talked to the police department about the enforcement issues, and they said yes, they would enforce these spaces. It'll be on as available spaces, but they weren't opposed to it on the fact that it was too remote for enforcement.
Okay, great.
Okay. Is there a motion?
Was there an ordinance now? There was.
Motion could consider introduction of ordinance. Is that right? Shall I?
Go ahead, whatever.
Make a motion to consider introduction of an ordinance. Do we need a number for introduction?
It's 1413.
1413 to modify Municipal Code Section 10-32-210 to establish 2 parking spaces with 2-hour time limits in the vicinity of 129 Laurel Street in response to the request from Southward and Associates.
Second that.
Wow.
We have second, a third, and a fourth.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
Yes.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. All right. Moving on. Last item on the agenda under new business, item 8G, consideration of recommendation to prepare an agreement to transfer the administration of the Healthy Cities Tutoring Program from the City of San Carlos to the San Carlos School District and to contribute $20,000 to the San Carlos School District for the administration of the Healthy Cities Tutoring Program for the fiscal year 2009-2010. Mr. Long?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To put this in context, the San Carlos School District approached the city and asked if we'd entertain the idea of transitioning the program to the school district because it's largely an academic program. They were of the mind that they could probably measure the efficacy of the program, train the tutors, and set the curriculum much better than we're capable of doing just because we're not in the education business. Kind of parallel to that, the Healthy Cities program was placed on the list of cuts should the revenue measure fail. And so the council was to consider eliminating the program effective June 30th, 2010. Since then, the school district has experienced equally difficult economic times, and instead of the original contribution of $40,000, they indicated that they could only contribute half of that, $20,000. The other would have to be made up, in their estimation, if they had the program, in-kind services or through fundraising. So in essence, they would take part of the program and administer it through existing staff. Subsequent to that, they found out they had an additional loss of funding of $1.4 million. And so there is a more emphasis on working with other outside agencies to fundraise to fully fund the program. So what we're looking at is transferring the $20,000 that we had for the remainder or the second half of the fiscal year, assuming that the first $20,000 has been spent. They would pick up the program and, along with their $20,000 and the other additional fundraising, carry on the program. The effect of this would be it could be a savings to the city, and depending on what level the council would like to fund the program, if at all, or in any subsequent years beyond that. You're familiar with the program. It's been around with us for 13 years. Started out as a program at a single school and grew to 6 schools, 4 elementary schools and 2 middle schools. It involves about 185 kids and the equal amount of tutors, and it's been a very successful program. But as I said, we're kind of faced with some difficult decisions to make in terms of funding this program for possibly the remainder of this year, and especially for future years. So the opportunity to transition this to the school district at this time is something that seems to have merit and should be entertained. With us tonight is Tom Green, the Director of Educational Services from the San Carlos School District, and Donna Beck, the Program Coordinator, should you have any questions for them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Long. Questions of Mr. Long or anyone else?
Mr. Long, I got a little confused with the dollar amounts that got floating around. So there's $40,000 somewhere. We were going to put in 20, or they needed 40. Can you go through that again?
Sure. Absolutely. There's $90,000. We'll just round figures. $90,000 allocated to the program. Approximately $50,000 was earmarked to be raised to offset that. 40 of which was going to be a contribution from the school district. So our net draw on the general fund would be $40,000. $40,000 from the school district, $40,000 from us, and $9,000 from other fundraising brought us to roughly $90,000. The school district, because of their economic difficulties, indicated they can only contribute $20,000 of their promised $40,000. So, as we go forward, we know that we have $20,000 less, but there has been evidence that an additional $20,000 can be raised via fundraising. In fact, there has been money that has been identified, although it has not been collected, that would help mitigate that. Not all the $20,000, but a portion of it. So, we're on the hook for $40,000, kind of the way it works. $20,000 of which we've already spent,
right.
$20,000 which we would transfer to the school district should they transition the program over to them for the remainder of the fiscal year.
And so the $20,000 plus the matching $20,000 would fund this program how far?
June 30th, 2009.
That's correct.
10.
Okay.
That's correct.
And again, that other $20,000 coming from the school board has not, or has not been committed, is sort of being fundraised?
No, the 20,000, there is 20,000 that has been committed from the school district.
Okay.
That's there.
All right.
Okay, questions? Yeah, Mr. Royce.
Yeah, I had some time to spend with our city manager on this item. There are some gaps in the report, but it's no reflection of Doug here. It's a complicated organization, and your predecessor on some of the accounting and the billings and so forth, there were some things that were unique to it. But I want to share 3 items, and I still have a couple questions. I'm glad that Tom Green is here. I think one of them he may be able to shed some light. The first item is, of course, the point that Councilmember Omar just brought up, that our budget for the year is $40,000. So the second half of the year, our budget's really $20,000. We're going to give that to the school. The expectation, though, in this proposal is that that funds it through the middle of this year, through June of through June of 10. But there's no expectation of funding past that point. Now, one of the strengths of the organization, of course, is it's a partnership. It's city, it's school, it's people that contribute to the program, it's all the volunteers that put all their time in and so forth. So we lose a little bit of that partnership because we're basically, of course, we funded it for a long time and got it going. It's a very successful program. But I do want to make sure that it's clear to everybody. My understanding is that it is basically $20,000 we funded through June of 10, and then basically the school has it from that point on. We will not be funding it from that point on. Make that clear. Second point is I'm always interested in, and of course, on how we take care of our people. We do have 2 part-time people. They're actually in the audience here who basically manage and make this program occur. My understanding is there will be termination of each of those from the city of San Carlos as an employee. The main manager will be transferred to the school, and I believe they will be picked up as a subcontractor. I see a nod of the head of that. And actually, the other person, there's also opportunity for her to be hired to help support the program, but we don't know the hours and how much and so forth. But those people will reside not as employees of the school district, but as a subcontractor, 1 or two people there. So my question is, and this is important, is that, and Tom, you could help with this, is the program moving to the school where the school district retains responsibility for healthy cities, or is the school district basically taking on the responsibility for funding a subcontractor and the program reports to the subcontractor? In other words, the person is basically responsible. And why that's important to me is the amount of risk. I want to make sure we have a soft landing, that the program succeeds. And so the question is, who maintains responsibility when it moves to the school or the contractor? I don't know if you can answer that. You understand the difference there? Thank you.
Green, Director of
And by the way, thank you for everything you do for the schools. I hear great things about you here.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an honor to serve the school district and the children of San Carlos. Regarding healthy cities at this point, the details have not been worked out on our end, pending the action of the city council, but it is our current intention, as I understand it, to, as you've put it, Mr. Royce, subcontract with Donna to coordinate the Healthy Cities program. So our commitment would be to a contract with her or her position to provide that program. So in terms of the legal arrangement, we would only be responsible for that contract. In terms of our intention, it is certainly our intention to maintain and support the program. It is an extremely valuable support program for our students.
Okay, so just to clarify, ownership, leadership of the program will be the district. How you staff it, whether or not it's with an employee or a contract, that's what you need to work out.
Correct.
But ownership resides with you, the district. Great. Thank you for clarifying that. And my last point is, I also, even though we're funding 20,000, I want to be clear. I know the contributions, of course, is a big piece. I know there's been little cash received so far. I mean, we're talking about a program that's been a year. My understanding is little has been received, a lot is pledged. So when at this point, do we just allow what comes in cash flow to go to the program, or do we look at expected contributions and say that funds half of our first year and half goes to the program? How do we handle contributions? It's a difficult question because we don't have the money in hand. It's pledged. But how do you recommend handling contributions? That's my last question.
Certainly, and the contributions would go towards the program and not to offset our first half of expenditures.
Anything received from this point will go to the program.
That's correct.
Good.
That's the plan.
Thank you.
Yes. And also, if the school district wants to partner with the city in any future time and request funds, supporting funds, they're certainly willing to.
Do you know if they tutor city council people? Okay.
Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor, I got a little confused there for a second when we were talking about fundraising. Who is doing the fundraising for who? Is the city fundraising for Healthy Cities, or?
That's correct. The program coordinator solicits funds from various sources for the program itself.
And after, assuming this is transferred to the school district, then it is a private contractor soliciting funds for that program.
That's correct.
The city is not involved in raising funds for a private program.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay. There's one person wishing to speak on this, Andy Klein. Pass that down. Thank you.
I think it's a shame that I'm the only one, but okay. The only thing I want to say is, I wrote a letter talking about how there was a distinct possibility this program was going to get cut, and we call it a transfer. The school district has to fundraise to come up with the money now. There's no promise we give them money in the future, which means the hole gets even bigger. So I think when we do talk about this, there's a distinct possibility. They just dropped into a $1.4 million hole. They have a parcel tax coming up for renewal, which we've seen that it's a little hard to get a tax passed these days. This program may go away. So I just think we need to talk about that as a broad issue, and whether you vote to transfer it or not, I think it needs to be discussed that the hole gets bigger for the school district when this goes to them, and there's no guarantee we give them any more money ever. So I think that needs to be discussed.
Okay, thank you. Any further discussion on this matter? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the transfer to the school.
I think it's authorized staff to prepare an agreement. Is that it, Mr. Rubens?
That's correct. We'll bring a formal agreement back once we've worked out all the details.
Okay.
So this is just authorizing the preparation of an agreement. We wanted to make sure the council was in support of the concept.
All right, so I move to authorize the staff to prepare the agreement.
Thank you. All right. Second? Is there a second? Is there a second to this motion? Well, I'll second the motion, if no one else will. I can do that, right? Okay. Further discussion on this matter?
I just have a few words on it. For a time, I volunteered as a tutor in this program. I respect Donna greatly and the work that she does. Have seen, personally the results of the efforts that people put in. I admire the program because there's so many hours that volunteers put in, and if you put dollars to those hours, that's a lot. But that all said, I think our Parks and Rec director put it correctly that it's a misplaced program. It's in the city programming, but it really belongs in the schools programming. Discussion I had with the city manager, I think over a year ago, was to that effect, that it's a misplaced program. I think we've been sort of foster parents with this program, and it needs to be adopted by the schools. I disagree with the public comment that we will never fund it again. We have had programs come to us in my years on council, asking for grants and money from the city for different programs, and we have at times allocated such funds. So I don't think necessarily it being transferred to the schools means that we will never fund this program again. We could fund the program through offering grants to it. They can certainly come to us. The school district could come to us and ask for funding. The contractor could come to the city and ask for funding. So it doesn't mean that we will never give another dollar to Healthy Cities. And to Mr. Royce's point about partnering, we still could have some partnering going on. But I do think it needs to be run by the school system. They know education, they know tutoring, they know these programs, and they have the staff that's much more able to do that than what we have in our Parks and Rec department. So I think it's a good fit.
All right, thank you.
I echo Councilmember Grocot's comments about the program. I frankly have concerns. We talked about this as a council, and we agreed to sort of fund it through the year. And given our financial situation, this is one of those things that has to be considered. But frankly, it's a great partnership that's had a long history. I think we should at least weigh what our commitment was and whether or not we can come through on this for the next 6 months and stick with the agreement as it is.
Okay. Further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Lewis?
No.
Councilmember Royce?
Yes.
Mayor Grisilli?
Yes. All right. Thank you, gentlemen. No, actually, because we're just about to the end. And I'm sorry, what? We've talked about, we talked about that. We have the adjournment, but I think we want to go to, I think the hours at least, we got at least hopefully a little bit of time. We can go to a closed session. Do we need an adjournment motion to close session?
Well, it's just we're going to go into closed session now for items 2 and 3 of the agenda.
Okay.
It's not,
all right.
Adjourn maybe is not the right word.
I'm sorry?
Adjourn maybe is not the right word.
Right, adjourn isn't the right word. Go into closed session. Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Convene. Thank you. Convene closed session. All right.
Reconvene.